Ladies and gentlemen, next up we have Sunita Kohli from K2 India to unveil and talk about her book, Kala. Kala, an essay on contemporary design aesthetics. Sunita Kohli is a national award winner, interior designer, furniture manufacturer, an architectural conservator, restorer since 1971. She was the first interior designer to be conferred the Padma Shri by the President of India and the Mahila Shiromani Award by Mother Teresa in 1992. Ladies and gentlemen, a big, big round of applause for Sunita Kohli. Can I have you on stage, ma'am? May I also have on stage Mr. Christopher Benninger. Can I have you on stage, sir? I would also like to call on stage Mr. Hans Bauer. Can I have you on stage, sir? I would also like to invite Shehenshah Mirza and Karishma Lobo to please come on stage and unveil the book. A big round of applause, please. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. May I request Sunita Kohli to please say a few words?
Thank you so much, Team IDAC, for this wonderful opportunity to have this book launched in this most historical of cities. And I'm really very happy, and I want to thank Hans and Shehenshah, and I'm sorry that Christopher, an old friend, is absent. And of course, I want to thank the curators for curating this wonderful show. And if I may, we can begin. And first, I'd like to show an AV that was created on Kala by the Jacqua team, particularly artists of the Jacqua team. Last year, they had supported, sponsored, and organized the launch of this book in Milan and in London in October 2022. And then in 2020, the following month, Kala and I were invited to New York, to the New York Literary Festival, which was exciting. And so it's done its little journey. It started its journey. I was invited to the Architectural Summit in Kathmandu, and most recently at the Lahore Literary Festival, where Kala was launched. So I would like to show this AV here. And it's very short. As I said, it's done by artists of the Jacqua group. And there I particularly have to thank Kanak and Ranbir Mehra and Mohit Hajela, who I also saw on the screen here, and Sandeep Shukla for creating this AV. So may we have the AV, please? India's design culture is a unique one. What the Western world refers to as a collective of art, craft, architecture and design is evocatively referred to by a singular term in the Indian context, Kala.
India's broad-based nature cuts across boundaries. It was a pleasure to delve into the minds of masters from diverse disciplines. I am deeply honored that they have chosen to share their valuable essays for this anthology, Kala. To quote Michael Freeman on Indian design, a new generation of architects and interior designers is looking for what is modern as well as unique. India has had 5,000 years of indigenous styles, which were interrupted by a century of colonial ideas, an oddly compressed timeline of India's architecture and design. But this is now the beginning of a distinct period, a new trend of architectural creativity in India. In these pages, we seek to go beyond traditional confines and constructs to explore the many facets of design. From the architect of New Delhi, Sir Edwin Lutyens, whose work progressed from country houses in England to Government House in New Delhi, is an important presentation by Martin Lutyens. To a brilliant essay on modernity as tradition, Brazilian architecture before and beyond Niemeyer by Andrea Aranya Correa do Lago, ambassador to India and who has been a jury member of the Pritzker Awards, equivalent to the Nobel Prize for Architecture. To a wide range of fascinating perspectives by eminent personalities on contemporary design aesthetics that celebrate art, craft, architecture, and design etymologies. These are essays that should be compulsory reading in all architectural and design schools. Kala has essays by architects, designers and art historians, many of whom are prolific authors and builders of cultural institutions. Influencers, and the transformation of the so-called English country house style is a brilliantly written essay on design by Lady Jane Churchill. An essay on taking an Indian brand to the world features artists' products that have been conceived by globally renowned designers who use the born from art approach to create objects of unsurpassed aesthetic and functional qualities. This thinking has resulted in many achievements and accolades for the brand artists. From cosmology to cartography, A Cultural Journey of Indian Maps is a deeply researched essay by the urban planner, Dr. Vivek Nanda, to essays on many other art and architectural forms, such as the ingenuity and beauty of the temporary architecture of exhibition structures. India's cultural and architectural heritage runs rich and deep, flowing from a 5,000-year-old history. It is a matter of pride that India is not a homogeneous culture. India is a living museum of syncretic cultures. This is best illustrated in India's architectural heritage. To quote, "Architecture is history written in stone." These lotuses are used as a leitmotif to illustrate the syncretism of Indian art and architecture. 1,000 lotuses, carved by Hindu craftsmen, adorn the ceiling of the prayer hall in this 17th century mosque in Gujarat. That is India. The journey of Kala, where many facets of design have been explored, would not have been possible without artis, that is, born from art. Artis pays tribute to fine traditions of exquisite craftsmanship by bringing together the finest in design and technology. It has been our privilege to bring to you Kala in association with artis, where two masterpieces have been crafted together as an ode to ultimate creativity.
Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the wait is over. We will hear the illustrated talk on the design views by the absolutely wonderful Sunita Kohli.
So as I said that at the outset, I would like to say that there is a symbiotic relationship between the geography and the history and the culture of a place. And all this informs our design aesthetics. So at the beginning, I would like to speak about India, what it was, and its geography. And as you know, that in the beginning there was no India. I mean, all the continents lay clustered together 170 million years ago. And then about 100 million years ago, they started to break apart, and a big chunk of land broke away from the eastern flank of the east coast of Africa, just above Madagascar, and tilting slightly anti-clockwise, it began a 40 million year old journey. It went northeast, and it traveled 40,000 miles across the ancient Tithya seas till it docked into the soft underbelly of the Asian landmass. And it kept pushing and pushing, and many years later, this was the land that would be known as India. And that push, that underthrust, which is still going on, it was sluggish, but it was relentless. And it still pushed, and it pushed and pushed till high mountains rose, and that is the rise of the Himalayas, which are the tallest and the youngest mountain range on the planet. But what was happening otherwise also? Is the sound all right? Because I'm getting a strange echo. Fine? So that there was a sort of a marshy trough that was left at the foot of the mountains. And this marshy trough slowly sank under the sea. And when it sank under the sea, a lot of rocks from that land, from the earth's, from the ocean's base, came tumbling up. Now, that together with the rivers that the mountains had produced and their systems, it kept coming, they kept hurtling down the Himalayas. And with that, they brought a lot of alluvium and soil, which was very rich, and it filled and filled and filled, till the Indo-Gangetic plain was formed, which is the richest alluvium plain in the world. And it is that theater which gave rise to, that landscape that gave rise to the great civilizations and produced some of the greatest empires. And as you know, wherever there are empires, there is also great architectural activity. Therefore, it was important to mention the geography that created the history of India. Of course, south of the Narbada, as we all know, I'm just stating the obvious again, was the Vindhya range. Now, the Vindhya range and south of it is amongst one of the oldest earth crusts on the planet. It has remained above the sea for 500 million years. So it is very different to northern India and its geological composition. And therefore, I feel sad when you see cities like Hyderabad and all the wonderful boulders are being pulverized to be lost forever. I mean, you are removing one of the most geologically important crusts that is available in the world. You are destroying millions of years of history. And for what this is being done, many builders here, many architects here, I'm sure you've got your reasons, but I think it's almost immoral. So excuse me for saying that when you destroy geology so blatantly. And other examples of what you find. So the the formation of this part is really very similar to what was happening also um, in Africa, in Australia. They share these features altogether. And when we see that, if, for instance, I'm sure most of you have been to Ajanta and Ellora, and if you're going to Ajanta and Ellora, and then on the roadside there are people who are selling geodesic rocks, and I'm sure many of us collect them. I mean, I love them, so I'm constantly buying them whenever I've gone to Ajanta. But that is part of the crystalline mast that floated across that Tithias Sea more than 50 million years ago. So that is also India, and that is the greatness of this country. So, of course, there's a fascinating follow-up that can go on and on about the geologies that have created our histories. But to get back to speaking about the design views that are part of this book, Kala, because this book is written, I mean, the essays in it are written by many, many eminent practitioners of architecture, design, people interested in craft, people who are museum builders. And there's a map. This is when it was all a cluster together, and this is the map of India. And now I show trade routes, because trade routes imply that there is an osmosis of cultures across geographies. I mean, even if you take something as simple as the name of India, after all, the name of India came from the Indus River that gave India its name, and that time it was the largest river of the subcontinent. And it is derived from the Sanskrit word Sindhu, which means river, which specifically means the Indus. Ancient Persians mispronounced Sindhu as Hindu. The Greeks turned the Persian word Hindu into Indus, and from the Europeans in late medieval times, the name India was derived. So there we have India. It happens because there are all these many geographical factors and these cultures that are happening across. But so there is a common thread that runs through the diversity of essays featured in Kala, and this common thread is the centrality of design in all forms of artistic expression. According to me, design is rooted in our multi-sensory experience of the world and the twin desire of the human eye to seek out beauty and of the mind's eye to make sense of our world and our environment. As one has stated in one's foreword in Kala, and I quote, "Design is foremost inspired by nature." Design is dynamic, it's all pervasive, and design runs through art and craft. It is everywhere, whether in nature or in objects hewn by the human hand. Close quote. To cite an example, among the thousands in India or globally, where all elements of Kala, that is art, craft, architecture, and design overlap, I speak of one where forms are inspired by nature. This is the Basilica of La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, designed by Antoni Gaudi. Interestingly, Kala features an essay by Sofia Abramchuk, who heads one of the several Gaudi institutes in Barcelona. And her essay analyzes Gaudi's genius through his handwriting. And in India, on a domestic scale, I would cite the example of the late 18th century summer palace of Tipu Sultan in Karnataka. And on a monumental scale, a prime example in India is the 8th century Kailash temple in Ellora in Maharashtra. And this is the largest monolithic structure in the world, and it is carved from the top down, as you all know. Then there are 3 brilliant essays which delve into the ideas and origins of indigenous design and architecture. So the essay Indigenous Perspectives, the Discovery and History of Architecture is a dialogue between the late architect Ashish Ganju and architect Narendra Dengle. This is also a seminal book which I had stated earlier in the AV, which every architect, designer and thinker on culture should read. And I had made it mandatory reading when I was chairperson of the School of Planning and Architecture in Bhopal. It's that brilliant a book. And I believe the scholars that their aim was that great architecture should have a deep resonance with our internal being. Dr. Shonalika calls essays titled Towards a Semantics of Architecture. And I really thought that these essays would be of interest to most of you, at least what is the quintessence of them, because everybody here is an architect or a designer, or they're involved in crafts, or they're involved in crafting things that go towards architecture and design. And in that, Shonalika call analyzes approaches to writing a new history of architecture from an Indian perspective by integrating the science of architecture with its humanist spirit. Central to her essay is the differentiation between the Western and Indian concepts of space. In the West, architecture is fundamentally articulated space or a containment of space, whereas the Indian concept of space is Akash, which is an infinite continuum. And Dr. Kaul uses the Chit Mandala to illustrate the three layers of space: the infinite external space, our mind space, and our heart space. Dr. Kaul's essay, that's the Chit Mandala, Dr. Kaul's essay emphasizes the vital link between the individual and the universal in the Indian approach to design and architecture. Then there is Neeta Khanna's brilliant essay titled Cosmic Connections, Feasting, Fasting, and the Hindu Temple. A visit to the temple was meant to bridge the space between the individual and the universal consciousness, the physical and the spiritual, and represented a journey to the core. This is the largest temple in India, which is Sri Rangam, and it has it's a stunning temple. It has 7 walls, and at the core is the temple to Vishnu. It's got, of course, many minor shrines all around. So this is the largest temple, and this is Anand Sai Vishnu in this form, and he's lying coiled on the snake after he has created this universe. I mean, Indian mythology can be quite brilliant. He's created this universe, but there's residual matter left to create other universes, should he so desire. But an interesting aside to this temple is that the eyes of Vishnu were found to be very sparkling, but one eye, obviously in those days everything used to be gold and silver and diamonds and jewels, but one eye shone more than the other. So there was this English trader in the 18th century, and with a corrupt pujari, he had that diamond gouged out, and it was a huge big diamond, and he took it to London, and from London it found its way to Paris, and Count Orlov was very interested in buying this. Count Orlov used to be the lover of Catherine the Great. And he felt that his relationship with, because she had many lovers, his relationship with her was kind of floundering, so he presented her with this great diamond, which is now in her scepter in the Kremlin Diamond Fund, which we can all see. So she took the diamond, but threw him out of her bed. So that came from Sri Rangam, that great temple. Then to go back to the essays, Vivek Nanda, as I said earlier, has a very richly illustrated essay from cosmology to cartography. As you know, the earliest maps that used to be made for purposes of pilgrimage. And one is Jain, one is Hindu, and of course there were other maps that used to be made. And then those pilgrimage maps turned into what we know today, today's cartographical maps. Then holistic concepts such as the ones referred to in these essays are often associated with sustainability. But sustainability might be a new buzz today, but in India it has always existed. So there are two essays written by Dr. Alka Pandey and Dr. Yuta Jain, and where they discuss that sustainability always went hand in hand with aesthetic beauty. And Dr. Alka Pandey's essays on Panchatattva, the centrality of the 5 natural elements in Indian architecture. So these are temples dedicated to air and to water. Then in Dr. Yuta Jain's essay, she illustrates the triple impulse of sustainability, utility, and aesthetics in a brilliant essay, Water Architecture in India. It's a wonderful book if anybody is interested in it. Morphology, Histories, and Ecology. So that was Modera, and this, of course, is Fatehpur Sikri. So then we go on to, in the essays, there are 5 essays on craftsmanship, and because I strongly feel that superb craftsmanship is at the heart of all construction. And these 5 essays illustrate that. Jaya Jetli, in an essay titled Positioning Arts and Crafts at the Heart of India's Culture, writes about their centrality to the everyday life of Indians. And then the glorious legacy of India's textiles and its spinning and weaving traditions is essayed by Rita Chishti, and it's another brilliant essay. And in the Indigo story, Anjana Somani showcases the checkered history of this dye, so deeply associated with Indian colonial history and its cruel practices in indigo's manufacture. Then in the art and craft of Puri, Pinaki Mishra lists the crafts of just one small town, which is in Puri. And in the design of custom-built classic cars, Diljit Titus presents a detailed account of how vintage cars were crafted. And of course, I don't need to say it, but the number of craftsmen in this country is 200 million, of which 40 million are weavers. And so there are three people who've written on craft in this book, Kala, and what really is the way forward. And I'll just come quickly to the last person, Dr. Shobita Punja. This is Dakshin Chitra in South India, and the essay is by Dr. Debbie Tyagarajan, who started this wonderful museum by getting from 4 states in India of brick by brick, beam by beam, dismantling it and then rebuilding it outside Chennai, and each houses a museum. So then there is that, and then there is Tasneem Mehta, who's written on this, and that's the inside of it. And then I come to, there are 3 essays on the visual and performing arts and on the written word that link with the central theme of design that underlines the compendium of Kala. And I would like to quote the award-winning Spanish architect, Jose Maria de Churchichuga, from his essay, What It Means to Design. So that's him. And then the Spanish sculptor, Alberto de Odeta, in his essay titled Evolution in and of My Art, says, and I quote, "My desire is to create a space with these sculptures where we may all reflect on the eternal question, where did we come from, who are we, where are we going?" And of course, the scale of Odeta's sculptures is correspondingly also architectural. Bharatnatyam dancer, she wrote an essay on her journey in design, Mallika Sarabhai, who I'm sure many of you know, at least many of the Indians. And the written word comes alive in historian Mannu Pillai's essay, The Queen's Speech. Manu's narrative is about powerful women who have been relegated to the footnotes of history, such as Tarabai, Noorjahan, Begum Samru, and several others like Begum Hazrat Mahal of Awadh. This was due to the Victorian colonization of the Indian mind, and I quote Manu, controlling knowledge, vocabulary, and the imagination has had enduring effects on our cultural memory. Close quote. Manu calls for a need to purge this colonial mindset in order to see anew, not just our history, but also our culture. And it's very much follows the premise of Edward Said in his book, Cultural and Imperialism. There are also several exceptional essays in the book that reflect tradition and modernity and the forging of new identities in architecture and design. And one is an essay on Sir Edwin Lutyens by Martin Lutyens, who was then the president of the Lutyens Trust in London and of the Lutyens Trust in the US. And he speaks about Lutyens' journey from country home to government house, from country house to government house. And as you know, that in the early 20th century, it was the desire of every well-to-do Edwardian gentleman, and I presume his wife also, that they should have their house designed by Lutyens and their gardens designed by Gertrude Lutyens, Gertrude Jekyll, I beg your pardon. So, but of course, he took many things like this dome from Sanchi Stupa, 2nd century BC to 2nd century AD, but he never acknowledged his Indian sources. Then we have what we've already spoken about, modernity as tradition. Andre Aranya speaking about what is beyond Niemeyer, who of course was a modern architect who greatly influenced, I think, a century of architects around the world. Then in architectonic harmony, architect Sunita Kohli, who incidentally happens to be also my daughter and the CEO of my company, writes about the creative ingenuity of presenting temporary architecture at design shows. And this is all done in real time. So she is, and the first really exhibition spaces to come up were India Design, which is the I think they're called the Ogan Group, from 2013 to the present. So she's always taken the same space, but every year done a different concept to show how you can create this temporary architecture within that same space. And of course, every year there's a new presentation of her collection of furniture for the year. So then, as I'm quickly showing these up to, and then there's an essay by Jane Churchill, which is also mentioned in the AV, and where she speaks about the influencers and the transformation of the so-called English country house style. That's it. And that's also Jane Churchill. And so then I come to that the influences of multimedia, social media, and technology are everywhere. They also influence design. Design magazines, TV shows, YouTube, apps, games, websites have a similar magical hold on us. Not on my generation, these things never existed, but certainly for your generation. Augmented and virtual reality further fulfill our desire for immersive design experiences and enhance commercial visibility for practitioners. Publisher of Architecture Plus Design India, that's Bibhor Srivastav, in his essay, The Dissemination of Design, speaks of how multimedia technologies are leading both an evolution and a revolution in the field of design. And so in the last essay in the book is a photo essay which I had done, which is on monumental architecture of India, a testimony to syncretic culture, because that is what it really was. And this is in Bhimbetka, 30,000 years old. These are the oldest Here you have the oldest representation, sorry, it went the other way around, of art that ever existed on the subcontinent. So I'll quickly take you through that. I already mentioned that where Lachins took the dome and the railing, and then there's this amazing Ajanta and how it was carved deep within this whole escarpment, and with its stunning paintings, which were discovered very late. And then, of course, there's Kailashnath, there's Kailash temple. And then we have medieval temples like in Khajuraho, and then we have this unfinished temple, which is the Bhojpur temple in just outside of Bhopal. And you see these wonderful bells. I just wanted to mention that for anybody who's been to Rashtrapati Bhavan and seen the forecourt, he has, what Lachins did is he created the sixth order. All of Western architecture is based on 5 orders, classical architecture. So he created the sixth order, and there the capitals have these beautiful bells that are hanging there, because because he understood the significance of bells in Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist traditions. This is several things, how people would carve, the plinths and everything, and which would be like storyboards. And there are things to be read, so I'm going to run through it fast because I've got 30 seconds left. This is, of course, the great Hampi, which, of course, came because of its topography and the wonderful surroundings, and that was the last thing. And this Bishnupur I saw on one of my trips to Calcutta, and I was so stunned by the beauty of these terracotta temples. And this is Champaner Pavagadh, which was the first capital of Gujarat, 7th century. This was built in the 17th century, and as I mentioned, I use the Lalit motif because the ceiling of the Jami Masjid is carved by Hindu carvers for an Islamic monument. And I truly feel that that is India and the way it really should be. And now my time's up, so I'm quickly going to stop because I hate being late. Last 2 slides. This is of my hometown, Lucknow. That's the Rumi Darwaza. And that is the amazing कभी जुबान से जो लफ्ज़ आना चाहिए वो बिल्कुल हट जाता है, you know. So that, and of course there are wonderful stories about how in the building of this started this great Dampuk tradition of cuisine. So may I end? Thank you for your very kind attention.
I think she deserves a bigger round of applause, everyone. Sunita ma'am, you are an absolute inspiration. And that was absolutely wonderful. May I please request you to stay on stage? May I please request Mr. Anubhav Ghosh from Asian Paints and Mr. Dhaval Thakur from Nova Exhibitions and Conferences to please felicitate Sunita Kohli. Can I have you all on stage, please?